Well, happy Monday evening, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather. Appreciate you joining me here this evening. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh area. We still can't get it to snow where I live in Raleigh. I know there were some flakes yesterday, but nothing too exciting. But we got a big storm in the mid-Atlantic region that is finally going to be heading out here by tomorrow morning. Some residual effects. It's going to take a while to clean up from that one, but unfortunately, we're not finished. There's yet another threat coming. It's going to start in the southwest and Texas towards Wednesday night, early Thursday, then heading eastward. We're going to be tracking it as it moves across the central and eastern states, especially the southern part of the United States, for the potential for some significant snow, ice, and maybe a wintry mess for many. So we're not done yet, unfortunately. Here's a look at current temperatures. You see the cold that's out there across the north central states here, below 10 degrees across the Dakotas. With all the fresh snowpack, the blizzard conditions we had yesterday, it's struggling right now to get out of the single digits in Kansas, and it will be dropping tonight as the winds die off. And northern New England is dry but cold as well, single digits and low teens from upstate New York into Maine. That cold has pushed southward. Remember, a few days ago, we were in the 60s and 70s here in Texas and Louisiana. Talk about 30s and 40s here as it's getting dark, and that temperature will continue to tumble. Florida's warm for now, but colder air is heading your way in Florida as well. Probably a falling iguana update coming here by tomorrow, I'm sure. So the only place to escape the cold right now is southern Cal, the West Coast, and parts of Arizona. Here's a look at our current hazards from Pivotal Weather. You can see things are quieted down across the plains in the upper Midwest, but we still have winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings stretching from the mid-Ohio Valley to the East Coast. And I'm going to blow that up in a little bit to show you. We do have freeze warnings in southern Arizona, as well as southern Louisiana, south and west of New Orleans, deep south Texas, and the Okefenokee area as well. Here's a look at the mid-Atlantic, and let me refresh this so you can see. We did have winter weather advisories as far south as northern Alabama, northwest Georgia, with flurries that fell earlier in the day today, a little accumulation there in the higher elevations. But for the most part, this storm is a mid-Atlantic storm, and you can see we still have winter storm warnings in effect for the northern two-thirds of Virginia, all of West Virginia basically, far eastern Kentucky, southeast Ohio, and the southern tier of Pennsylvania stretching to South Jersey. And Maryland and Delaware and D.C., of course, are included in that. In fact, we're seeing double-digit snow totals basically in a stripe here. Some of you a little bit less depending on your proximity to the water. But nonetheless, the biggest storm I saw since 2016 in the D.C. area. So it's been 9 years since we've had a snow this significant. And ice as well, a problem here early tonight over central and eastern parts of Virginia into the eastern shore and southern peninsula here. If you are in Virginia Beach area on south, you have avoided, for the most part, this winter weather, but some flurries are possible here tonight. So with the storm leaving, we still are going to have residual effects. If you look at the power outage map here, you can see a lot of folks still without power in Virginia, over 64,000 customers, Kentucky over 50,000, and lingering power outages from Missouri to Illinois and Indiana, as well as West Virginia. And most of that's along the I-70 and South corridor here. If you look at Virginia a little bit more closely, you'll see most of the problems are actually west of RVA and east of Roanoke, basically Franklin County to Roanoke County, Bedford County, Campbell County. So parts of central, southern Virginia are under that because of the ice, the weight of the ice that we had earlier today. And in Kentucky, most of our issues are actually in east central Kentucky, Menifee, Morgan, Johnson, and Martin counties, as well as right along the river here, Henderson County and Union County. So you can see where the ice has been the worst. Even though the snow has been pretty significant, one of the bigger snowstorms we've had in quite some time, but several power outages as well, just north of the Boot Heel in Missouri, Ballinger, Madison, Iron, and Reynolds County. If I say those wrong, I apologize. I'm going to do my very best. So what's next? Well, this storm system is now booking it eastward. You can see the upper level low is moving along pretty significantly at a quick pace, so it's going to be offshore by morning. The cold front with it is dropping down into Florida. We really didn't have a severe weather outbreak today, fortunately, in Florida, a few heavier storms, but all the issues that we had yesterday in this area have come to an end, and that we will have a quieter pattern when it comes to severe weather for those spots. But the winter storm pattern is going to be increasing here in the next several days. You can see here's our next one, and it's going to drop down here. There's actually going to be a cutoff low that forms in parts of northwestern Mexico, the Gulf of California. And as that southern track continues and the cold air settles in, we are going to see the moisture running up and over colder air. And that's going to set up our next system that I talked a little bit about here over the weekend. We're going to look at that in just a second. You can see with the NAM here, things are going to come to an end outside of the mountains by midnight. And then you can see just some lingering snow showers winding down in the morning tomorrow. Some additional instability snow showers in the mountains here, ski areas, nothing unusual there. But mostly quiet weather for tomorrow, just cold and windy at times. As we head into Wednesday, though, you'll see on the left fringe of the map here, a little bit of light snow breaking out in New Mexico and far southwest Texas. And that area of moisture we have to keep an eye on because eventually the southwesterly flow is going to draw it farther to the north and east as this trough begins to lift away. It's going to be very cold. Look at this blue feature here. This is an upper level low, which is a piece of the polar vortex right in here. That's very cold air aloft. So we're going to have cloud cover with that, but very cold temperatures. But on the base of that, we have a pretty fast flow out of the west. What that's going to allow to happen is that this moisture from the Pacific gets carried into the base of that trough, where temperatures are well below average. Now, as we take a look at snow totals before that happens, you'll see we're still looking at quite a bit in West Virginia and PA in the mountains here, but for the most part, this is winding down for us outside of the lake belts. As we look at winds here as well, you'll see that wind gusts tonight are going to stay pretty brisk, 40-mile-an-hour gusts in the mountains of North Carolina and Virginia, and upstate South Carolina, 30 to 40 in the Poconos, and up into New England as well. And these winds are going to take some time to die down. So with that cold air funneling in tomorrow and the wind increasing, it really isn't going to feel nice out at all. Unfortunately, really nasty wind gusts here up in the Catskills, over 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts during the day tomorrow, relaxing a bit as we get to the nighttime. But the cold wind is the story here. Cold, for the most part, dry pattern here, at least for the more populated areas. And then we take a look at what's to come after that. So I did tease you about that, but we're going to talk about it now here. No sense in ignoring it. You can see the trough that drops down tomorrow afternoon and night south of Arizona by daybreak on Wednesday. And what's going to happen here, we're going to have a big ridge of high pressure building into the west coast and a little bit of a weaker ridge building here behind this polar vortex. So in between, we've got this stuck flow here where this cutoff gets stuck, but it draws moisture in from both the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico on this southwesterly flow. Now, the moisture is going to ride up and over this area of high pressure in the Caribbean and create a pretty cloudy and pretty moist environment here. And the big question mark is going to be, again, who gets to see the snow, who gets the ice, who gets the rain, how cold is it going to be? And models are starting to agree a little bit more on how that's going to play out here for Thursday and Friday. Now, the weekend is not yet set in stone. That is where the uncertainty lies here in the longer term. In the medium range, though, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, things are starting to come together here. So we can talk a little bit more confidently about that. So here's our trough on the European. And you'll see by Friday, it's beginning to pull away from Texas and then moving across the southeast Friday night and Saturday morning and eventually off the coast by the time we get to the end of the week. Now, keep an eye on the southern tail of this, where it does become more unstable near the Gulf Coast. We are going to have some heavier moisture, heavier amounts of rain and thunderstorms, and maybe a little bit of severe weather as well. Now, the European does not agree with every model. What I should really say, let me back that up, is that the GFS does not agree with the European and the other models. The GFS, what it's doing here is actually pulling this upper level low and phasing it with a northern feature that drops down here from Manitoba and North Dakota. And this here has a sign of a slightly slower system to exit and also potentially a more well-developed system by the time it gets to the East Coast later on Saturday. We're going to talk about what the ramifications of that are going to be, but you can see right here, this is not what we want to see unless we love snow and East Coast storms. This is a much different look here. So here's the GFS later Saturday evening, and here's the European. Oops, thought I had loaded that for you. And you can see the difference is stark. It's about 400 miles. If you cut the difference in half in the Canadian, this might not be a bad forecast because it's in between the two, but again, it could be totally wrong as well. So here's a look at what happens down south first. And whoops, let me back that up for you just a bit here. Here's Wednesday night, and we see moisture gathering in South Texas. It'll be primarily liquid, but colder once we get up closer to the I-20 corridor here. You'll see the Big Sky country first, and then over to the Metroplex. We'll probably have some light snow falling by morning on Thursday. There'll also be a wintry mix in between, and you can see that includes northern Louisiana Thursday morning. Now, there'll be evaporative cooling here that allows whatever mix there is to go back to snow, and could fall pretty heavily Friday afternoon or Thursday afternoon, and especially Thursday night, early Friday morning. As this low pressure system tracks east along the Gulf Coast, heavy rain is expected. It'll be a cold, soaking rain in places like Lafayette, New Iberia, Homa, and New Orleans, and pretty heavy rain as well in coastal Mississippi and Alabama and western Florida. But you don't have to go too far north. Interstate 20, give or take, before that is more of a freezing rain event. You can see the pinks here indicating freezing rain, and the purples are indicating heavy snow. Maybe not quite Tyler, but when you get up to the north of Tyler, northeast Texas, southeast Oklahoma, into southern Arkansas, right now the picture is painted for this to be a bullseye for some heavier snow. And in some places, that snow total might end up in the double digits and maybe even above a foot. Learn to talk, I promise. The good news is that this system isn't going to linger for too long. It'll be out of here in time for the weekend. This is midnight Friday night, early Saturday, and you can see quieter and eventually milder weather for the second part of the weekend before things get unsettled again. Now, the GFS model is actually in relatively decent agreement here with the European. You will see that it's a little warmer at the onset here Thursday afternoon. So instead of an all-out snow during the evening rush in DFW, it's actually going to be a wintry mix or even some rain. But it does go back to snow eventually. It just takes longer for that to happen. It does have very heavy snow in northeastern Texas, the Arklatex area, southern parts of Arkansas, and northern Mississippi, Memphis included, Nashville as well, all the way up into downstate Illinois, even central Illinois and Indiana. So on top of the storm you just had, a little more is coming here by the time we get towards the end of this week. But it is pretty good on timing here in kicking things out beyond that. Here's a look at DFW, so you can see the trend on the European ensemble is for more and more snow with each run. A couple days ago, it was showing an average of 3 inches, then yesterday 6, and today the average is about 8 inches on the ensemble. So the trend is heading upwards on the European model for DFW. And I just wanted to bring that up because I know it's the biggest city that's going to be impacted by this. Here's a look at that average so you all can see 8 inches right here in the Metroplex, 6 in Abilene, about 7 here in northeast Texas, Gainesville, about 5 or 6 around Durant into far southeast Oklahoma. And then when we go into Friday, it picks up around Little Rock even, 5 inches, Hot Springs, maybe 6, northwest Mississippi, 3 to 4 inches. So this is taking an average out of everything and giving you an idea where the bullseye may fall here. Now, that's the ensemble. Here's the operational. This is just one of those ensemble members. And, of course, it's higher. It shows about a foot or so of snow, locally as much as maybe 15. For North Texas, southeast Oklahoma, even OKC, about 4 or 5 inches. Lawton, 3 or 4. And 5 inches in Fort Smith. It gets all the way into the Ozarks here with this heavier band of snow. So this would obviously be a pretty significant storm for this area. Here's the GFS model so you all can see. And let me refresh this here because it's just still finalizing here. And the difference with the GFS in this run is that it's warming up from Dallas on south and east. So the amounts are higher north of DFW. Take a look at Arkansas. We're talking 12, maybe 13 inches of fresh snow coming Thursday night and Friday morning. And that even carries on into northwest Mississippi, into West Tennessee, even into the southern boot heel of Missouri. So the GFS is already calling this a pretty substantial southern snowstorm. It's not just snow either. Unfortunately, we're going to be talking about some frozen precipitation. Take a look at this, some light to moderate sleet, DFW back to basically the I-20 corridor here, all the way back into southwestern Texas here on Thursday. And you can see it gets worse when we get into Arkansas and Mississippi as well. The GFS also has a significant amount of sleet, but you'll see that the totals do not really get too high until this moves farther east. So not as bad as what the European is showing. Freezing rain, that's another issue here. You'll see on the European here, mainly, again, I-20 on southward, Waco, getting down close to Round Rock and Austin. We're talking maybe 1/3 of an inch of freezing rain or ice. Maybe over an inch here when you get into far east Texas and northwestern Louisiana, includes Shreveport, Bossier City, and farther east. Don't worry, I'm going to pull this east so you all can see what's going on in the southeast in just a moment. The GFS, again, is not as bullish on ice amounts, but it does have ice. Where the European has heavy snow, it's got more freezing rain north of the Metroplex into southern Arkansas. So it's warmer aloft than what the European is showing us. And remember, the Canadian was kind of in between the two. Here's a look at the East Coast now. Once we get rid of our storm system, you will see that this system is going to be moving along pretty quickly. Now, the European moves it pretty quickly so that there's not a lot going on north of the Ohio River. There's some, but it's more of just a quick type clipper here, and it's offshore. But as we take a look here at the southeast, and I will zoom in to show you that, apologize here as we do this on the fly, you'll see it looks pretty impressive around Tennessee and along the Alabama-Tennessee border, North Georgia, into the western two-thirds of North Carolina. Now, by the time it gets to the Triangle in Charlotte, there's a warm layer that gets in here and changes it over to freezing rain and sleet. So those who are wishing for a lot of snow in this area here are probably not going to be pleased with this, not to mention the dangers that come with frozen precipitation. But the European kicks it out pretty quickly here. It's progressive with this system. The Canadian model is also pretty progressive with the system, but is a lot colder, especially down into central and northern Georgia and the Midlands of South Carolina. You'll see the low pressure system goes over eastern North Carolina, so not a prayer of this becoming a snowstorm for the Carolina coastline. But you'll see it's got a more substantial amount of snow on the way out across Richmond and the Bay Area and even southern Jersey. So the Canadian's farther north than the European. And then we've got the GFS model, which has been giving us some incredibly interesting results, to say the least. And if you're a GFS fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But take a look at this. The GFS is doing something the other models aren't doing and cutting off this low here and basically pulling our low pressure system a lot closer to the coastline here. And as that happens, yes, there will be warmer air coming up the East Coast, but it will be in what's called a baroclinic zone where this low can basically bomb out and strengthen. And if you get just inland from the coast, what that can mean is a substantial amount of snow and maybe even a blizzard when we get into New England here Saturday night, early Sunday morning. So the GFS has been the most consistent model showing this. If you go back a run, you'll see it was showing that. Now, earlier, it wasn't showing it, but the run before was hinting that was going to happen. The run before that, again. So you can see the GFS, every 4 runs decides that it's not going to try to do this, but brings it right back in here. And if you're in the Northeast, you're definitely, if you like snow anyway, you're definitely rooting for that. But none of the other models are showing that. So again, here's what the European does show us, and it's not very impressive here. We're talking maybe a few inches across the mountains here, very little once you get into Virginia, North Carolina, and certainly up the East Coast. But the Canadian model is kind of a blend of those. And you will see here, it has a storm that looks a lot like what we just had, but maybe a little bit farther to the south in Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee, and up into South Jersey. And then there's the GFS model. And this one's the one that all the snow weenies are probably super excited to see. I'm not going to lie about that. And it's looked different with where the bullseye is, but I'll show it to you folks. But this is a big outlier at this point. I mean, yes, if the low does come up this way and strengthens the way it does, it's going to drop a lot of snow. You can see 1 to 2 feet widespread from basically north of Baltimore through Philly and Reading, all the way up into New England, including even parts of New Brunswick. And we've seen crazier runs even before then. Here's the 12Z Jersey, up to 3 feet of snow. The run before it, of course, I told you that one shied away from it. And the one before that was farther south. But again, 3 out of 4 runs here showing substantial snow and what would be the biggest storm in the Northeast in several years. So again, the jury's still out on it. There is ice that we need to be keeping an eye on here in the Carolinas especially. And you'll be able to see that here. A little bit of a chance. Whoops, I guess I lost it here. Oh, it's loading the new model. That's why. But you can see here a little bit of an ice threat here. Basically, the I-40 corridor down 85 here. And also a freezing rain threat here, unfortunately, in the longer term. You can kind of see how this breaks out along I-20. And if you look into the southeast, and again, the new Europeans coming in, wiping out what I was just looking at. So bear with me. But you can see 1 to 2 tenths here, but farther south. Raleigh, Clayton, Fayetteville, Southern Pines, York, Greenwood, South Carolina, all the way down to places like Sharpsburg, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, almost Montgomery, and close to Jackson as well. The GFS, on the other hand, has a more substantial ice storm in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Not quite as much when it gets into the Carolinas. There's some, but not quite as much. So we've got a lot to watch here, folks. The southern end is certainly going to be a challenge. A couple days ago, the snow threat was kind of going away in the Triangle and in the Piedmont areas. Then it came back yesterday, and now it's kind of trending more towards ice or even ice to rain. So the bottom line is there's going to be a substantial storm here at the end of the week, but the question mark is still how much snow falls, who gets the ice, who gets the heavy rain, and is there going to be even severe weather in the southeast? We're going to break that down for you here in the coming days. But I'm not ashamed to show you all the GFS model in the Northeast, but right now it looks like it is quite the outlier. But if anything changes and we see the other models coming to the GFS, it will have a big victory, a big coup scored here. But right now, my inclination is that it's probably going to end up trending back to the south and moving the system offshore. So, of course, we're going to have to wait and see on that one. But I appreciate everybody's time tonight. Thank you for joining me today. I give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, as a Christian man. I just go to God every day and pray for everyone's safety. Everybody who comes here, I believe, has been brought here for a reason, even if you don't personally believe that. But I think there's a lot of anxiety out there. And the great part about being a Christian is that there is hope in Jesus. And that helps relieve the anxiety you may have. Philippians 4:6 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And if you have any resolutions this year and one of them is to get rid of anxiety, my personal opinion is that you should talk more to God. Ask him to help intervene in your life. He's going to fight the battles for you. You can't do it yourself. We're not here to do it ourselves. Our lives are short. So my encouragement to you is that there is something greater out there, and there is eternal life promised to us through Jesus. So if you have any prayer requests, I will spend time in prayer for you here soon. And I plan to be back on tomorrow afternoon or evening with more updates. Hope you all have a blessed night. See ya.